It was the year 1918 and the First World War was coming to an end. France was devastated after a conflict in which, despite being one of the victorious nations, it recorded thousands of deaths and countless destroyed cities. The French were aware of the possibility of having to face their enemies in subsequent years. For this reason, the famous and impressive Maginot Line was born, a front that extended along the borders with Italy and Germany and would protect the entire country from a possible German attack. But was it really impenetrable? Although it seemed invulnerable, something did not go as France expected, and the Germans managed to occupy their territory. How was the line built? What were its defects and virtues? And finally, how did the Germans get through this impressive wall? Sit back and get ready to learn all the details about the Maginot Line, the famous and indestructible French border built in the run-up to World War II, and its unexpected end. Are you ready? Then, prepare to travel back in time. To begin, we must understand the context. The First World War took place between 1914 and 1918. One of its great duels was the one that Germany fought against France and Great Britain. As we mentioned earlier, France suffered great consequences in its territory, the North being one of the most devastated areas. At the end of the war, the Germans signed the Treaty of Versailles, which basically forced Germany and the former Austro-Hungarian Empire to disarm and make important territorial and economic transfers to the victorious Allies. However, knowing the enormous military power of Germany, no one dared to trust that it would not try to expand again in the future. This is why each nation took the precautions it deemed necessary to preserve local security. France did not have natural borders to provide any kind of security against a possible attack. It was necessary to develop some kind of strategy that would provide total terrestrial protection. On the other hand, it was essential to have the time necessary for the restructuring and adaptation of the army. In terms of economics, they could not lose sight of the industrial mines in regions such as Lorraine and Alsace, which had already been reasons for dispute between the two countries. For these reasons, in 1922, the defense minister and veteran of the First World War, André Maginot, began the project of a fortified wall that would serve as a defense and that would be located throughout France, protecting the borders with Italy and Germany. This plan, devised by Maginot, was thought and consolidated by the Border Defense Commission, commanded by Marshal Philippe Pétain. 5 years later, in 1927, the commission would be dissolved, but a new organization would be founded known as the Corps, which was the true architect of the border. Thus, in 1928, construction began along the border with Italy, a country that was beginning to show the first signs of fascism. But what were the characteristics that made the amazing Maginot Line a unique and invincible wall? The French government decided to invest a hefty sum of $6,000 million in this wonderful defense device. The line would run 400 overland kilometers from Switzerland to the English Channel and would be approximately 25 kilometers wide. As its name implies, the project was a linear fortification. That is, a series of forts positioned in an interrupted line, arranged in sets of more than 100, which were separated by a distance of approximately 15 kilometers from each other, and within them were bunkers joined by anti-tank obstacles and barbed wire. The entire line was made of steel and concrete. The forts were divided into small and large fortresses, and the latter were equipped with 75 and 135 millimeter howitzers and inhabited by more than 1,000 soldiers. From the bunkers, about 30 troops awaited the enemy with machine guns and 47 millimeter anti-tank guns. In addition, the Maginot Line had observatories located above the hills, where approximately 250 combatants watched 24 hours a day in search of enemy threats. Although the Maginot Line was well regarded by the highest French authorities, several specialists judged the impressive wall as too expensive a project that did not justify its construction. For example, Prime Minister Paul Reynaud and the famous Colonel Charles de Gaulle proposed to invest that sum of money in armored vehicles, weapons, and airplanes. Perhaps time would prove them right. But nothing and no one could stop the creation of this defense superstructure. The construction of this massive wall had 3 stages, beginning in 1930 and ending in 1939. Months after its completion, the Maginot Line faced its first major test. Adolf Hitler assumed as Chancellor in Germany and put in motion his blitzkrieg strategies. The Führer at first intended a short war, so he used a tactic that was based on an initial bombardment, followed by the use of mobile forces that attacked at high speed so that the surprise factor prevented the victims from defending themselves. They started with Poland, continued with Denmark, then Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and in May 1940, it was finally France's turn. As we said, the wall seemed indestructible and invincible, but like every human invention, it had its Achilles heel, and Germany took advantage of it. Although the forts of the Maginot Line stretched for several hundred kilometers, it left a few spaces empty. The result of this was fatal. The Nazi army entered through the immense forests of the Ardennes region, which connects Belgium and Luxembourg with northern France. The Germans entered the wooded area, dropping hundreds of explosives through the small vertical openings in the Great Wall. This stealth attack caused the death of thousands of soldiers by suffocation. In this way, Germany managed to break what seemed to be an impossible defense device to overcome, and as it had already done in other countries, it managed to occupy the entire territory. It took 10 years to build the innovative fortification, and within days, Hitler easily mocked its poor security. We have reached the end of the history of the impressive Maginot Line, and we want to ask you, what do you think was the main mistake in the construction of the wall? Do you think there was some other kind of method to stop the Nazi occupation? Leave us your opinion below, and don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications to learn about many more military events that left their mark on history. This was all in a new episode of Military History. Thank you for joining us, and until the next video.